take your seats. Good afternoon, and welcome to the 2020 State of the City Address. My name is Dr. Cecilia Adams, and I am an at-large member of Toledo City Council. A special welcome to all my fellow members of Toledo City Council. Thank you all for being here. Please stand. I have lived in Toledo my entire life. I've seen a lot, the ups and the downs. Tonight, as we conclude the first month of a new decade, I am more confident than ever that we are moving in the right direction. At the same time, we are at a crossroads, and the time to make decisions about our future is now. Look around this beautifully restored space here at the Toledo Zoo. This theater, this entire museum is here today because of decisions we made nearly 100 years ago. Our city, our country, in fact, was at a crossroads back then as we are today. Toledo had a choice to make, and it chose to invest in itself. It is time to do that again. As an educator, I know well what investment in a child will yield. I have seen it throughout my entire career. Love, care, quality education, safe neighborhoods, and happy, hardworking parents for every child in our city will give the next generation of Toledoans the tools they need to succeed. But we must build the foundation for them, and we must start now. I believe this investment can be shared by all of us, and as a result, we will all benefit for years to come. Investing in our kids, our roads, our safety, and our neighborhoods must be our number one priority. Thank you for being here tonight. I know you are all looking forward to hearing from the mayor about his plan for investment. To introduce him, I would like to welcome a wonderful young woman who, along with her peers, will inherit the Toledo of tomorrow. Please welcome Tierney Sturgeon.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Dr. Adams. My name is Tierney Sturgeon, and I am a senior at Notre Dame Academy, and I am so proud to be here to introduce the mayor tonight. None of us were alive 100 years ago, and if you were, I would really like to know your secret. And I wasn't even alive 25 years ago, but I do understand that the choices we make today will have consequences down the road for all of us. I am about to graduate from high school. I'm looking at colleges, and I know that the decisions I am making now will affect my future and the future for all of my community. I invest my time in the things that I care about: fighting for climate change, putting an end to gun violence, and promoting equality. I invest my time and energy in the results that I want to see. The same is true for my friends. We care about Toledo, and we want to see Toledo thrive. We see what you see, and we know that without proper investment, Toledo will never reach its full potential. Mayor Kapszukiewicz has a plan to invest in Toledo so that we can have a future that we all want. I am pleased to be able to introduce him this evening and for him to tell you all about it. Please welcome Mayor Wade Kapszukiewicz.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank everyone for being here this evening. Such a beautiful, wonderful space. I'd like to thank Tierney for her introduction of me. I'm going to conclude my remarks tonight by talking about Tierney a little more. I'd like to thank Dr. Adams for her introduction. I'd like to recognize members of City Council, thank them for being in attendance tonight. I would especially like to recognize Matt Cherry. He is the district member of council who represents this part of Toledo. He is also the president of Toledo City Council. I believe he's doing an excellent job in both capacities, and I would like us to give him a round of applause. I'd like to welcome all of you, especially my wife and my 2 children, who have joined us and are here to participate in a conversation about our future as a community. The state of the city is an opportunity to always talk about where we've been, and we'll spend a little time on that. But what I want to focus on tonight is where we're going. And we're going to talk about the future and the choices that we have that will dictate the sort of future that we are going to share and benefit from as we move forward. I suppose I'll begin by saying that last week I was in Washington, D.C. At a meeting of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. They meet twice a year, and it's a great gathering of mayors and other city officials that get together to share ideas and talk amongst themselves. And so if I did it once, I probably 30 times answered the question, so how are things in Toledo? How are things in Toledo? And I suppose I could have just given a perfunctory, oh yeah, they're great. How are things in Boston? How are things in Topeka? How you doing down there in Miami? But I wanted to put some thought into my answer. So I thought about it. I really pondered it. And what I found myself saying again and again with each mayor that I met to chat with was, how are things in Toledo? Toledo is improving. Toledo is improving. I believe that. I believe that is our story. Our story is that as a city, we are improving. We're better off than we were last year, and we'll talk about that. We're better off than we were 3, 4, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, certainly 10 years ago. We're improving. We're absolutely improving. And I say that not as some politician making a campaign speech. It's not sloganeering. It's not, just sort of cheap PR. It's real. And there are reasons I say that. Yeah, there's an intangible quality that things are getting better, but there's some raw stats, statistics, examples that put some meat on the bones to my contention that things are getting better. What am I talking about? Well, let's list a few of them. Things are improving because after 70 years of fighting about water, last year we signed the regional water agreement that will put behind us the petty fighting and the squabbling and the disagreements over our most precious resource in this region, our water. Nobody thought we could do that. And in fact, we have been fighting over water so long that there are communities in our region, Oregon, that only exist because we've been so good at fighting with each other over water over the years. Those days are over. We did something that I don't think a lot of people thought we could do. We put together a plan that works for us, works for our suburban partners, and will breed, I hope, an era of cooperation with our neighbors. Because if we did it on water, we can do it on transportation, economic development, public safety, and so many other things. So when I say things are improving, you bet, I point to that as a real example of progress. There are also, sure, thank you. Wasn't aware they're going to show that picture. I wouldn't describe the picture as progress, but I can't change my face. There are other examples of progress. On the economic development space, we really have. We have a lot to be proud of. We had a lot of successes this past year. Site Selection Magazine for the second straight year, and the Site Selection Magazine really is the Bible of the job location community. They ranked us third in the entire country for economic growth for cities our size, and actually best in Ohio. Kempler Industries ranked us fourth in the United States for manufacturing jobs. The Associated General Contractors said that Toledo is from 2018 to 2019, year over year, the fifth fastest growing construction market in the country, and that's among cities of all size. You put us up there with Chicago, New York, Boston, all of them. Fifth best in the country. We created over 800 new jobs, retained almost 800 more. That resulted in almost $400 million of capital investment. What I think I might like the best is this story. For the second straight year, there was an international auto supplier that had never expanded beyond the boundaries of its own country. In 2018, the company was called Topia. They're a Japanese company. And this past year, it was Axiom, a Canadian company. Those companies had never expanded beyond Japan and Canada. They knew it was time to move into the American market, and they could have chosen any city in the entire country to expand their operations. And for 2 years in a row, major auto suppliers chose Toledo as the place they wanted to be. When I talk about progress, I'm talking about things like that. When I'm talking about progress, I'm talking about the fact that after 2 or 3 years of going back and forth and trying to figure out the right way to do it, we reached an agreement to fight lead poisoning in our oldest neighborhoods that affect some of our most vulnerable children. You bet that's progress. Not far from here, actually many of you may have driven past it, at Danny Thomas Park, adjacent to Danny Thomas Park in the Old South End, we enjoyed the opening of a Cal Ripken field. Now, what's a Cal Ripken field? I tell you, it is the top of the line in youth recreation offerings. There are only 90 of these fields in the entire country, and the one that we opened in November with Cal Ripken cutting the ribbon is the only one in the state of Ohio, the only one. It was a public-private partnership, millions of dollars of investment. It is going to provide opportunities for our children, and it's going to pump life into an important corridor in our community. When I talk about progress, that's what I mean. We are improving. Public safety is another area where we are improving, and I think now is the time to recognize that in the back, either standing or some may be sitting, we have representatives of the 66th police class, the 38 cadets who will graduate next Friday, who are joining us, members of our police department. They, absolutely. They are part of a force that is getting larger and getting more diverse. When I became mayor 2 years ago, the size of the police force had been steadily shrinking for 12 consecutive years, from a high around 700 officers in the late 90s to a low of 602 officers, which is how many officers we had in the street the day I became mayor. 2 years later, we have 631. I promised that if we did nothing else, by the end of my term, we would have a force of 660 officers. 2 years in, we're halfway there. We're going to keep that promise, and when we build police classes in this community, we do it in a way that reflects the diversity of our community. The classes we have brought on have been the most diverse in terms of gender and race of any class since the early 1980s. That's progress. That's improvement. Our city is safer than it has been. We still struggle with gun violence. Every big city does. But with the exception of that troubling category, crime decreased last year, year over year, by 7%. As these things go, that's a pretty significant decrease in overall crime rate. The fire department is an example of where we have seen improvement. And when people talk about what a great job Brian Bird is doing as chief, they are talking about a lot of things. I might point to his leadership on making our fire service more diverse and reflecting the diversity of our community. Under his leadership, my 2 years as mayor, we have doubled the number of African American women who serve in the fire department, and we have increased by 30% the amount of women who serve in leadership command positions in our fire department. When I talk about improvement, when I talk about progress, that's what I'm talking about. We have made progress, absolutely. When I talk about improvement, I'm talking about roads. We have a challenge with roads, and we're going to be talking about that. But we are still making some improvement. We, in 2018, resurfaced more miles of road than any time since 1999. We will get back to roads, I promise you. But if we're talking about improvement, we are doing better. And in 2018, we did better than we've done in almost 20 years. If there is one area I can assure you we are doing better, much better, than we have done in a long time, it is on the budget. When I became mayor, we had a $3 million deficit. A little over 2 years later, we had a $17 million surplus. And let me dig down on that a little bit. For most of the last 10 years, because of a ballot initiative passed by the citizens 10 years ago, City Hall has only been able to balance its budget by taking money out of the capital fund and transferring it over to the general obligation fund. Now, this was a power City Hall obtained during the worst of the Great Recession, and it was needed, and it was part of how we survived those tough times. For most of the last 10 years, for 8 of the last 10 years, we have had to rob Peter to pay Paul to balance our books. The last 2 years, 2 years that I have been mayor, we haven't transferred a penny. Not only have we not transferred a penny, we ended with a surplus. Is that improvement? You bet it's improvement. $10 years ago, we had a rainy day fund of negative $14 million. You can only have a negative rainy day fund when you not only have no money in the bank, but you pay debts to one person by removing money from a debt you owe to someone else. That's where we were 10 years ago. Today, as we stand here, we have a rainy day fund of almost $24 million. Are we improving? You bet we're improving. I could go on, and goodness knows I'm a politician, I could go on and on. We are improving, okay? We are. Case closed, moved and seconded. We're improving. We're improving. We have to keep the momentum going, though, which is why there's a slide that is going to remind all of us that in this year, a census year, we need to take the time to fill out the census to make sure we are counted properly so that we get our fair share of resources. We need to count everybody. We need to count the homeless. We certainly need to count our homeless veterans. And I know I shouldn't put a plug in, but if there is something that bothers me more than about anything else, it is veterans who put their lives on the line for our country, who come back to this country and find themselves homeless. So if you find yourself with some extra time on your hands, tomorrow night you should go to the Seagate Center and participate in the winter dance party that is being put on by 93.5 to benefit veterans charities. And I suppose that's the end of my commercial for that. But I take it very personally. We need to count ourselves, and we need to count everybody. So there is no doubt that Toledo is improving, no doubt. But we're just nowhere near. We're nowhere near where we need to be if we're going to be the sort of community that we all want to be. Toledo is improving, but in too many ways, we're still failing. You don't often hear that in speeches like this, but it's true. Toledo is improving, but our kids are still the least prepared for kindergarten than any other kids in this state. 81% of the kids who show up to day one of kindergarten have already failed the state readiness assessment. And so when 4 out of every 5 kids shows up on day one and, according to the state of Ohio, is not prepared to learn, well, you bet it's going to be harder to educate a child like that. Toledo is improving, but that's a problem. Toledo is improving. Our police force is growing. Look at them in the back. They're going to graduate next week. And yet, we still have fewer police officers for a city our size than what the Department of Justice would recommend. Toledo is improving, and our budget is sure as heck improving, and yet we still have the worst bond rating of any of the big cities in Ohio. What does that mean? Who cares? That's just fancy number talk from a nerdy numbers mayor. Well, it means that when we borrow money, you, the taxpayers, have to pay it back at a higher interest rate than the taxpayers in Dayton, Cincinnati, and Columbus. That's why it matters, and that's why it matters that even though we're improving, we're still not where we need to be. We are improving, but we still don't provide near enough the offerings for our kids. We don't do right by our kids. We live in a community where we have, let's be honest, Sylvania, Pacesetter Park, that program they have out there with soccer and all the fields, and it's just wonderful. We don't do as well there. We don't do as well on pools. We don't do as well on rec leagues and parks. I'm not saying kids don't have anything productive to do with their time, but too often, what they have, their productive time is dictated based on whether they're lucky enough to live next to a Boys and Girls Club or a YMCA. Shouldn't be that way. Their city should be able to invest in them, to make sure that they have positive options. We got great parks, got 130 parks in this city. And those parks are baseball diamonds. In fact, I am a numbers nerd. I'll tell you, we got 73 baseball diamonds. Of those 73 baseball diamonds, only 28 of them are playable, 38%. That means that 62% of all of our baseball diamonds, 3 out of every 5, I might call it a ball diamond. It's really a backstop surrounded by weeds. That's what we got. We have 59 tennis courts. Only 29 of them, less than half, are playable. That means a majority are not. We got 44 basketball courts, and yet only 24, 55%, barely over half, are playable. We're improving. We are improving. But does anyone think that's good enough? I sure don't. That's not good enough for me. We are improving, but yes, we still got an issue with potholes. Last year, we undertook what we call the pothole blitz. Might have been April or May. I sort of looked around and said, okay, I know potholes are a problem in this part of the country. Wherever you have snow and salt and ice, you're going to have potholes. Okay, this seems like an unusual amount. So we took a 6-week timeout. I took crews off of certain sewer work, alley cleaning, and we said, the heck with it. We're going all in. We're filling every pothole we see, and we're not just going to respond to complaints like we normally do. We are going to send our crews up every street in the city, and by the way, there are 1,100 streets in our city, everyone. And when they see a pothole, they're going to fill it. They did a great job, actually. I measure everything. By the end of the blitz, we were essentially getting no phone call complaints on potholes, which I assure you is a rarity. They did a great job. But when we sent them out, we thought that we'd probably find 50,000 potholes. Nope, didn't find 50,000 potholes. We found 162,000 potholes. So, is Toledo improving? You bet it is. We got 162,000 potholes. Toledo's improving. But is it good enough, or can we do more? I know we can do more. I know it. We're competing. You might not think about it in these terms. We're competing with Dayton and Akron and Buffalo and Detroit and Flint and Grand Rapids. We're competing. They are our competitors. So let's see where we stack up with our competitors. Okay, now there are some similarities, and there are probably more things that are similar about us than different. There's a lot of similarities. And every one of those cities I talked about and others that I didn't list all have faced some struggles over the last 60 or 70 years. I'm not breaking any new news. We've seen massive population shifts from the Northeast and the Midwest and the Great Lakes to Florida, Arizona, California, Texas. But they all have. Yes, the weather here sometimes is not ideal. It does snow. But it snows in all those cities. There have been plant closures, and I'm not here to say whether it's because of NAFTA, bad trade deals, globalization. It doesn't matter. There's been pain. There's been economic pain. And all those cities have felt it. There are those who say that we struggle because of labor issues, whether it's labor costs on one side, or whether it's a lack of workforce development that provides talented workers to help our businesses grow. Could be, but every one of those cities I listed face the same thing. There are challenges with urban school systems in this country, and certainly in Ohio, where not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times since 1997, the Ohio Supreme Court has said that the way we fund public education is unconstitutional. That's a problem, and it's an outrage, and it's a challenge. But it's not just a challenge in Toledo. It's a challenge for the Columbus public school system, the Cincinnati public school system, the Dayton public school system, and Akron, and all the rest of them. We face challenges, no doubt. There's no doubt, but all of those communities do. There's nothing different at all about the challenges we face. Nothing. Not one difference. But something is different is happening in Toledo. Yes, all those communities faced challenges over 70 years and lost population. Want to hear an uncomfortable truth? We're still losing population. Not only are we still losing population, look at the slide that's about to pop up over my shoulder. We're losing population at a faster rate than any other big city in Ohio. So we know that cities in this part of the country have been hard hit, but geez, Buffalo is starting to add people again. Pittsburgh, which I remember as a little kid as a drizzly gray steel town, is now a town that hosts G7 summits. All right, we know Columbus is growing, but so is Cincinnati. Akron may not be growing yet, but it's not losing anymore. Toledo is still losing population, and it is losing it faster than any other city by a percentage in Ohio, including Cleveland. So what's different about us? What is it? Can't be the weather, can't be labor costs, can't be public schools. What is it? What is it? I might argue that it is our failure to invest in ourselves, our systemic failure to invest in ourselves. We should believe in ourselves enough to want to invest in ourselves. We should care about ourselves enough to want to invest in ourselves. In fact, look at this slide. We spend less per capita in Toledo than any other big city in Ohio. Not by a little bit, by a lot. We spend less per capita on police, less per capita on fire, less per capita on parks, infrastructure, roads. I'm going to take just one example. It's not the most important, but it's on my mind. Parks. We spend $41 per citizen on parks. Well, what's that mean? That, numbers, dork mayor's doing it again. Well, I'll tell you. That's half of what they spend in Cleveland, half of what they spend in Columbus. It's 1/5 of what they spend in Cincinnati, but it's even worse than that. Of the tiny amount we spend, do you know what we spend an overwhelming majority of our parks budget on? 83%. Baseball leagues for kids? No. Mowing grass. Mowing grass. And we don't even do that very well, do we? So move to Toledo. We mow a mean blade of grass. Is that what we want? Is that what we want? That's not what I want. It's not what I want. We're improving, but we can do better. We can do better. And for the remainder of my time tonight, I'm going to talk about our plan to do better, because we do have a plan to do what successful cities do, to invest in themselves. It is a plan that is called Issue 1, and it'll be on the ballot in 47 days. March 17th, 47 days from today, Issue 1 will be on the ballot, and it is a plan to invest in ourselves and to begin to become the sort of city we want to be. What's Issue 1? Well, I'll tell you what it is. It is exactly, not a little bit, not kind of similar, it's exactly what the city of Columbus did in 2009. Remember in the worst of the Great Recession when our voters were giving City Hall the ability to rob Peter to pay Paul? Well, the citizens of Columbus faced a proposal identical to what we are proposing 47 days from today. They passed it. Since passing it, what's happened? Columbus has become, without exaggeration, the fastest growing city in the United States of America, north of the Mason-Dixon line, east of the Mississippi River. The fact of the matter is, cities that invest in themselves succeed. It comes down to this. It really does. It's a simple question. Are we going to be content with making progress? Baby steps of progress, but still progress. Hey, I'm excited that we added so many police officers the last couple of years, because 3 years ago, we didn't hire a single one. I'm excited about all the roads we resurfaced in 2018, because in 2017, we didn't resurface one. So we are making progress. Are we going to be satisfied with the progress that we're making, the baby steps? Or are we going to say, enough is enough? Enough of trying to do things on the cheap and to get by and to limp along and to do half measures. Let's do it. Let's invest in ourselves. Let's become the city we want to be. For most of the last 40 years, we have been content with managing the slow decline of our city. I was born in 1972. In the census of 1970, Toledo had a population of 383,000 people. In my lifetime, we have lost 100,000 people. Again, let's make this apples to apples. There's a lot of cities in this part of the country that lost population, no doubt. But remember, they're all starting to turn the corner and grow again. We're turning the corner, we're getting better, but we're not growing yet. Something's missing. The part that's missing is the investment. We've lost 100,000 people. What are we going to do to change it? Now, I get it. Change can be difficult. I know that. And some of us may be happy with the progress we're making, and some folks may think it's enough. Some people might be happy with the status quo, happy with just being okay, happy with scraping by and surviving. And by the way, we are scraping by and surviving. Okay, I am not happy to manage our decline. I'm not. I don't want Toledo to survive. I want us to thrive. Okay, I want us to thrive. And to do that, we're going to have to do some different things. You know, if good enough ain't good enough anymore, well, then we got to change what we're doing. To create the Toledo of our dreams, you know, we're going to have to be bold. We're going to have to be big. We're going to have to be brave. We're going to have to be courageous. And we're going to have to move out of our comfort zone and do some things that maybe we haven't done before. I promised you 2 years ago when I became mayor that I wasn't just going to sit around and twiddle my thumbs and watch the world go by. We're going to try some things, and we're going to try some big things. Well, here goes. We have a plan to invest in our roads, invest in our safety, invest in our children, invest in our neighborhoods, invest in our future. It's called Issue 1, and here's what it does. It is a 10-year plan. Over 10 years, we are going to make investments in all of the important things that matter in our lives and matter to our city. We are going to invest in our police. I talked about how low staffing had gotten by the time I became mayor. When Issue 1 passes, we will add a net, even when you bake into the cake the retirements that will happen, a net of 100 additional police officers. So that from the 602 officers we had the day I became mayor to 2023, we will grow our force by a net of 100 officers. That will put us at 700 officers, the highest level that we have had since 2003. We haven't had 700 officers in 20 years. We will when Issue 1 passes. And again, when we increase our safety forces, we do it in a way that reflects the diversity of our community. You pass this issue, we will invest in our safety. We're going to invest in our neighborhoods. The Land Bank has done a fantastic job fighting blight and helping lead us in the challenge of rebuilding our neighborhoods. They need help. They need help, and after we pass Issue 1, there will be funding to fight blight and provide incentives to continue to fight lead poisoning. When we pass Issue 1, we will invest in our youth. I talked about, frankly, the appalling recreational offerings that the city of Toledo provides to its youth. I contrast it to Pacesetter Park, what they have in Sylvania. Okay? Get ready, because when Issue 1 passes, we're going to increase what we do on youth recreation sixfold. Sixfold. We will make the commitment and the promise that every child in Toledo will have an activity for him or her. It's not going to matter whether you live next to a YMCA or a Boys and Girls Club. Every kid in every neighborhood will have a positive activity that your city will provide to you. The city used to do it. It used to do it 41 years ago. It is going to do it again so that every kid will have, and you know what? I don't care if it's soccer or basket weaving. Every kid is going to have a positive activity when we invest in our children. This is how we're going to do better on our pools. Remember, it wasn't too long ago, we weren't sure if the pools were going to be open. We were passing the hat trying to raise corporate funds to keep them open. Then even when we did have them open, sometimes they'd close in August because the lifeguards went back to college. Nope, not anymore. This issue passes, the pools are open from Memorial Day to Labor Day, no questions asked, period. And Issue 1 is how we will join the successful cities of our state, every other one of which already has been providing universal access to pre-K to its 4-year-olds, because when Issue 1 passes, every 4-year-old in our city will have access to universal pre-K. Every kid, every successful city already does that. And the passage of this issue will make that a reality. Now, every other city that does that asks its taxpayers to pay 100% of the total, 100%. The taxpayers of Dayton and Cincinnati and Columbus and all these, 100% funded that way. We don't want to do that. We believe it should be a partnership. And so we will be the only city that requires our private sector to play a role. This is the public-private partnership that we all should want. Do you know why? Because we're all in this together. The public is going to have to play a role, but so will the private sector. Yesterday, we saw a tiny glimpse of what this can mean. I don't know if you saw the news. I don't know if maybe you were there. But as part of the partnership I'm talking about, every graduating senior at Scott High School this year will be able to go to college anywhere in Ohio, public institution Ohio. Could be University of Toledo. I know Dr. Gabriel wants that. But it also could be Ohio State or OU or Kent State or Miami or anywhere. Totally free, tuition, books, everything. Not only them, but either their mom or dad too. That is the sort of game-changing initiative that we can do if we believe in ourselves and do this together. The public does have to play a role, but the private sector is ready to play it too. I recognized him last year. I'm going to do it again. The gentleman who made that happen is here with us. He is writing a $3.5 million check out of his pocket to make sure those kids can go to college. He's writing $1 million check out of his pocket to help be the private sector match on our pre-K part. We're going to need people like him to make this happen. And if you saw that story and you saw those pictures, the picture of that girl that the Blade should win a Pulitzer on, frankly, the moment she realized that her life will change forever, that was powerful. And that's what we can do when we do it together. So we are going to need people like Pete Cadence. So we're going to need people like Pete Cadence, who's sitting in the front row, to join us in this work. Please look up Hope Toledo. The website's up there, the logo's up there. If you believe that that moment captured in that photo is something bigger than all of us, then you'll get involved, because we're going to do this together. Everyone has to play a role in what we're trying to build. So this levy is going to do all those things, but I'm just getting started, and I am saving the best for last. This levy, when we pass issue 1, is going to do a lot of stuff on the capital side. What does that mean, capital side? Well, it means we're going to invest in ourselves. We're going to build things. We're going to fix things. We're going to do things. I talked about our parks. We're going to invest in them. I talked about our ball diamonds. If we're going to be increasing 6-fold the amount of money we spend on youth rec leagues, if we're going to make the commitment that every kid in Toledo can play baseball or do basket weaving or whatever, every kid, it'd be nice if they had a place to play that wasn't overgrown with weeds. It'd be nice if 3 out of the 5 ball diamonds weren't unplayable. It'd be nice if half the basketball courts weren't unplayable. It'd be nice if half the tennis courts didn't have weeds coming up through it. This part of the levy, this $20 million a year, every year for 10 years, that is $200 million, is going to do those things. Fix the parks, the ball diamonds, the tennis courts, the basketball courts, the shelter houses, the senior centers, places like the Frederick Douglass Community Center in the Central City, or the Eleanor Kale Center in West Toledo, or the Friendship Center in Point Place. We're going to invest again in our safety forces. Okay, we need new police. We also need new police cars. And out of this part of the levy, we are going to commit 50 new squad cars a year, 3 new fire rigs a year. Count who knows how many leaf suction machines or snow plowing items need repair and don't have a path to do it. We'll do those things. We'll make those investments when we pass issue 1. $20 million a year, every year for the 10 years of this levy. That's $200 million. Now, I have saved for last what I believe will be a popular part of the program. I am not a dummy. I know that our roads are an issue, and they are an issue. I talked about the 162,000 potholes we have. So what are we going to do? Are we going to limp along and be happy with marginal progress, or are we going to fix these roads once and for all? Issue 1, if it does nothing else, will fix the roads of our city, period, once and for all. We will spend $40 million a year, every year for 10 years. That is $400 million over 10 years on residential road repair. Not talking about big streets, we get state matching money for that. Not talking about residential roads. What does that mean? Well, remember at the beginning when I talked about 2018, we did more miles of road than any time since 1999? We did. That was $9 million. What we're talking about is quadrupling what we do in our best year. Not just one year, every year for a decade. Let me say it a different way. Because to be honest, in 2019, we didn't have as good a year as we did in 2018, so we fell back to a normal amount, spent about $4 million. What does issue 1 mean? It means a 10-fold increase in what we do in an average year, because $4 million is about the average program over the last 20 years. A 10-fold increase in what is average. Let me say it one last way. Regardless of how much money we spend on these roads, what you care most about is the deliverable. How many roads are we fixing? Last year, we resurfaced 1.6 miles of residential roads. 1.6 miles. When issue 1 passes, we will resurface over 70 miles of road every year. That is an amazing 50-fold increase. 50-fold increase over what we did this past year. So over 10 years, we will fix 700 miles of road. Politicians, successful ones, the governor of Michigan and others, have campaigned in the Midwest on the slogan of let's fix the darn roads. I won't use the profanity, but I will say this. This will fix our roads once and for all. Let's do it. Let's fix these roads once and for all. And to put this in visual terms, I have brought Calvin up here to help. When we rehearsed this earlier today, I told Calvin, I promise you, this is the part that's going to be on the news. So he dressed for the occasion in his best fluorescent orange road construction work. So, we have a choice to make in this community. We can be happy with the progress we're making. Again, we're improving. We can be happy with that. If we're happy with the status quo, we vote no on issue 1 because we're happy with the way things are. Okay, we'll resurface some roads over the next 2 years. We will resurface these roads, literally these roads. These are 28 roads, and these are the roads that under the status quo, same old program, we will resurface in 2020 and 2021. It's a good list. It's perfectly fine. These 28 roads will be the roads that we do over the next 2 years. Or we can decide to invest in ourselves and to do what successful cities do and to vote yes on issue 1. If we take that course of action, we won't resurface this many roads. We will resurface these roads. Stretch it out. Pull it out. Keep going. Geez, every time we practiced, it was perfect. It was perfect. And the one time it counted, it hits Dr. Adams' foot, and now look at it. There are 391 roads on that street. There it is. 170 miles of road. Remember how many we did this past year? 1.6 miles. You could be happy with 1.6 miles. You can be happy with this list of 26 roads or 28 roads. Or we could do 391 roads totaling 170 miles. And what is significant here is that, you're not leaving, are you? Okay. What's significant here is that this is the list for the first 2 years. This is the first 2 years. This is a 10-year plan. There's 8 more years after this. So this list might get some media attention tonight. It's certainly going to be well reported. Afterwards, we have a little reception, and there's easels where every one of these roads will be spelled out. It's going to be on our website. We need your help. We need you to look at this list. We need you to see if we're missing a road. We need to hear from you, and we need your input, and we're going to build this list. This is just the first 2 years. Let us know what we missed, because then in years 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, we'll get to your road. We will fix these roads once and for all if we choose to invest in ourselves. And with that, thank you. There is one final part of this plan, and this may be the most important part, because it is an example of, let's be honest, the city of Toledo in the past maybe making a mistake. But it's an example of us learning from the mistake and listening to you. There has only been one previous attempt to do what we're trying to do in 47 days. One previous attempt, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago. And the voters asked, all right, I understand, we need to fix our roads. We need to invest in ourselves. I agree, I understand. Can you promise me that this new money for roads is really going to go to roads and it's not going to be redirected into some other fund? And the city was not able to say yes. I'm not blaming anyone. It was a different time. The budget was different. The economy was different. They couldn't make that promise. And you know what the voters did, okay? We heard you. We listened. And this time, the biggest difference in our plan is that written into the ballot language, it should be on my shoulder right now, that's the ballot language you are going to see in 47 days. Highlighted in yellow is the legal, lawful requirement that this new money for roads must be spent on roads. It can't be spent on anything else. This is, you will be making that decision. You will be forcing us to spend this new roads money only on roads. That is so different than what happened last time. So no matter what neighborhood you live in, what kind of street you live on, improved, unimproved, by law, the money has to be spent that way. So think about it in any terms you want. You want to think about a lockbox or a firewall, whatever metaphor floats your boat. This money has to get spent on roads. So when you vote on issue 1, you're not only voting to resurface literally 50 times more residential roads than we did this year, and not just 1 or 2 years, but every year for a decade. You're not only voting to spend 10 times more on residential roads than we did this past year. You're not only voting to spend $400 million, almost $500 million on our roads. You are also voting to require that we can spend the money no other way. This is a level of accountability that I think is important and will build the trust with our voters as we head to the polls in 47 days. That is our plan. That is our plan for Toledo. And it's a necessary plan because we find ourselves at a crossroads. We're at a crossroads in Toledo right now. Everyone knows I like history. One of the wonderful things about history is that everything's always already happened at least once or twice before. We're in an interesting time. We're at a crossroads, but we've been here before. Specifically, Toledo was in the exact same place as we are today about 90 to 100 years ago, about 100 years ago. The economy was still strong. Economy was strong in Toledo about 100 years ago, but we knew it couldn't last forever. They were fighting in Washington, couldn't get much done. There was scandal in Washington. Republicans and Democrats were yelling at each other. And we weren't getting a lot of help from Columbus either. Sound familiar? It's exactly where we are today. They were at a crossroads. It was time to decide what the Toledo of the 20th century was going to be. What was the Toledo of the 20th century going to be? There were some choices that had to be made. There were a couple directions we could have gone. They were at a crossroads. They had to decide what they wanted to do. And what they decided to do 100 years ago is what Toledoans have always done. They pulled themselves up by their boots. They dusted themselves off. They rolled up their sleeves, and darn it, they built things. They invested in themselves. they started building the Toledo of the 20th century. They built the Anthony Wayne Bridge and the Anthony Wayne Trail, and they and the Metro Parks and the downtown library and countless schools and shelter houses, and yes, about 6 or 7 buildings here at the zoo. Now you know why we're here tonight. This building was built at that time as a part of a decision that they had to make then. This building, the construction of this building is flashing over my shoulder right now. They built things. They invested in themselves. And make no mistake, the stadium the Rockets play in isn't Toledo Scales Stadium, even though Toledo Scales was a major company and a huge economic force in our city. The bridge that goes over the river isn't called Champion Sparkplug Bridge, even though Champion Sparkplug was a huge company and employed thousands of people in the city. No, these were public investments made by the public, for all of us. And 100 years later, they're still here. Look how beautiful this place is. 100 years later, it still breathes life into us. The Glass Bowl, the Metro Parks, the university, all of that, 100 years later, still serving us, still providing the backbone of our civic body and a guide for our future. It is now time to build the Toledo of the 21st century. Toledo of the 20th century was built by those men and women because they believed in themselves and invested in their city. It's time to build the Toledo of the 21st century. I inherited the Toledo that they built. All of us have spent time in this theater when we were kids, I'm sure. I inherited what they did for me and for my kids. What we have to do is prepare our city for the next generation, for Tierney and her generation and her children's generation. Tierney Sturgeon, who introduced me, is the leader of her generation. She's the leader of her generation in Toledo. She just was awarded the 2020 Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Drum Major for Justice Award by the Catholic Diocese. It is given to someone whose life demonstrates support for Dr. King's call for service, peace, justice, and racial equality. That's Tierney. She is the founder and leader of the Toledo Chapter of Citizens for Climate Lobby. She is the co-founder of Student Advocates for School Safety. After that terrible shooting in Parkland about a year and a half ago, she organized and was really the primary leader of that march downtown. She is the leader of her generation in this city and is among the most impressive young women I have ever met in my life. She will be inheriting this city. Her generation will be inheriting this city. I had a great life growing up in Toledo because of the courageous decisions that those men and women made 100 years ago to build the city, to invest in themselves. It's time for us to do it for the next generation of Toledoans. They will inherit the decision we make 47 days from now. Let's not let them down. We can do this. We've done this before. Let's do it. Let's believe in ourselves. Let's fix our problems once and for all and be the city that we want to be. We can do it, and we need to do it. Thank you. God bless you, and God bless our city, the great city of Toledo, Ohio. Thank you. I hope they turn the, oh good. I was about to say, I hope they